Congressman, what does Joe Biden need to do to combat the message that he does not align with socialist principles? It's got to be more than put out an ad with someone with a Cuban accent.
Steph, that's exactly right. Here in South Florida, there are a lot of victims of these socialist revolutions: Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua, the terrorist FARC in Colombia, which is a left-wing group. And the vice president has been associated with these governments unfairly by the Trump campaign, yet he hasn't defended himself from those attacks. Joe Biden needs to come down here to South Florida and introduce himself to a lot of these Hispanic voters. Joe Biden's been in politics for about 50 years, but a lot of people who live in this community have only been in this country for 10, 12, 15 years. They don't really know him, and he has to tell them explicitly, I'm not a socialist. I have no sympathy. Unlike some people in the Democratic Party, I have no sympathy for the Castros, for Maduro, for Ortega in Nicaragua, for Bukele in El Salvador, who's showing an authoritarian streak. He needs to make that point clear and understand that immigration is an important issue for most Hispanics, but it is certainly not the only issue that Hispanics care about.
Okay, I want to stay on that because it is not the only issue. And people vote, like it or not, on what affects them, not what offends them. Are Democrats misdiagnosing Latino voters? They always talk about immigration and deportation, and that matters, but Latinos are the fastest growing demographic of entrepreneurs in this country. You know what matters to them as well? Taxes and regulation. Does Joe Biden need to start talking about that to them?
That's right. I think the Biden campaign has to understand that one of the reasons that the president is having success with Latino voters is because he is trusted by them on the economy. And the point you just made, the Hispanic community, especially here in the state of Florida, is an entrepreneurial community. They want to open their restaurants. They want to get back to work. They want to know how we're going to emerge from this COVID crisis. And sure, they have some disagreements with the president on how he's handled it, but they want to know what Joe Biden is going to do to make sure they can get back on their feet, make sure they can reopen their restaurants, keep their businesses. That's another point where the Biden campaign, I think, is lagging. And then lastly, the report earlier made this point, a lot of voters here are outward looking. They care about what's happening in Cuba and Venezuela and their countries of origin. Those are local issues in South Florida. And the president has invested a lot in those issues and speaks to them frequently. I think the vice president's campaign, Vice President Biden, could do a lot more there as well.
But why would all those small business owners trust President Trump? We're seeing small businesses shut down amid this pandemic in record numbers. The way the PPP program was originally started, if you were a business owner married to an undocumented immigrant, you didn't get access to the money, and Republicans wouldn't even look at the HEROES Act that corrected that.
For now, the Trump campaign's message that before the pandemic, Hispanic businesses and Hispanics were enjoying record low unemployment. You hear the president's campaign say the same thing about African Americans. That message is sticking because I don't think the Biden campaign has done enough to explain, to show how they're going to help bring that prosperity back. You hear a lot of criticisms about how the how the president has handled COVID-19. Obviously, those criticisms are more than fair, but you don't hear enough about what to do afterwards, how to bring back the economy so that these families, these small entrepreneurs that you mentioned, can keep thriving and prospering.
Let's talk about young Latino voters, because Bernie Sanders makes the other side of the argument. Joe Biden is going to need a much more progressive message and progressive policies if he's going to get them out and voting.
Steph, if I was Joe Biden and I wanted to win the state of Florida, I would not be taking Bernie Sanders' advice. Bernie Sanders is the reason why the socialist label has stuck for some voters on Joe Biden. Bernie Sanders is the reason why a lot of South Florida Hispanics in particular are afraid that the Democratic Party has moved too far to the left, why they're susceptible to this messaging from the Trump campaign that they should fear the Democratic Party. That's why Joe Biden has to reintroduce himself and tell these voters, I am a deal maker. I spent decades in the Senate trying to bring Republicans and Democrats together. I was the guy Barack Obama would send to negotiate with Mitch McConnell. I want to bring this country together. I am not a radical, and nothing in my record indicates that. That's the message that a lot of these Latino voters, people who understandably are concerned with all this talk about socialism, because they left their countries fleeing those ideas and fleeing those kinds of revolutions. So they need to hear from Joe Biden. They need to know who he is. And when it comes to South Florida Hispanics, at least, if I was Joe Biden, I would not be taking Senator Sanders' advice.
Two reminders: democratic socialism, while might not have the best branding, is a lot different from the socialism from the countries where they come from. And Joe Biden doesn't associate himself with either set of principles. Thank you so much for joining me, Congressman. I appreciate it.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.